Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Robots and Red Tape. As always, I'm your host, Nick Schutt. And again, everybody out there, I really want to thank you for being part of part of this team and part of the audience and part of, the community that we're building. It's really awesome and really appreciate everybody. You're part of what makes this show so fun. So, really happy to have my friend Austin Keller on with me today. Austin, how are you, sir?
Doing good. Glad to be on.
Absolutely, man. Really appreciate it. So, Austin, for those folks out here who don't have the opportunity to know you yet, man, you mind telling everybody just like a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got here, man? What's your story, Austin?
Right. Absolutely. So I'm Austin Keller. I'm the director of data science at IntelliDyne LLC out of Virginia. I cut my teeth in the manufacturing world. So I was a chemical engineer coming out of A&M. Went and worked for semiconductor, Japanese automotive, German automotive manufacturing. Some pretty tough customers, if we're going to be honest. And then made my move into data science and analytics post COVID. Went to Georgia Tech and got my master's there, and then that's pivoted into this role. So since working with IntelliDyne 4 years ago, I've done some work with the Navy, some corporate, large scale work, some work with the Department of Justice, some really exciting work with the VA. We did on some veteran suicide stuff. So feels like a little bit of everything.
Yeah, man. No, that's fantastic, and yeah, obviously having touched a lot of very different industries, like, healthcare, defense, manufacturing. What are some of the lessons that you've learned about technology that are kind of ubiquitous across all of these different industries that you've had the opportunity to work in?
Surprise to nobody. I mean, number one, Excel is king. I don't know how else to put that one, but I feel like that's the one universal truth. Every company seems to run on some Excel spreadsheet at some level
Hmm.
that is stored on somebody's desktop as version 15 final underscore redo underscore like Matt's version.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, besides that, generally, uh, I think this is almost more of a human level, but if it works, people don't tend to want to mess with it, right? There tend to be a lot of technologies or systems in place that quote unquote just work, and it's not worth the effort to, or it's not in the company's interest to completely bulldoze it just because something fresh or something new's come along. So a lot of things that you'd be surprised with, man, that seems older than I'd expect.
Hmm. Absolutely. No, and is that why so many like government agencies and critical infrastructure like operators like rely on 20 and 30-year-old systems?
Absolutely. So, if it works, why mess with it? That especially in the government space, right? If it works, why fund it? If it works, why go to Congress and ask for more money?
Hmm.
But that's occurring inside of pretty much every system. So once you miss any single change, every opportunity gets a little bit harder, right? So if I've got a MacBook down here from 2017, and it's now officially past its maximum updates. Now I got to buy a new piece of hardware, right?
Hmm.
So now I'm converting everything. It's not just press update. Now I got to be bringing a new piece of hardware. So every single one of those updates just it's a little bit harder, a little bit a little bit less works, a little bit less seamless. So each one of those successive technologies becomes harder. So you start stacking that on 20, 30 years,
Hmm.
it seems almost insurmountable for some of these.
Yeah, and I would assume there's a huge amount of risk associated with like upgrading some of these systems as well, especially when they're running critical systems.
Yep, and they keep getting more embedded, right? It's like a tick, right? It's just going to keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper and getting more in there. So I've worked with a company where we had an inventory system in the late 2010s that still ran on DOS,
Hmm.
and that was the inventory system. So when
Crazy.
you look at it and you said, okay, in some CEO or McKinsey comes in and tells you, hey, let's get rid of that. That's way too old. Okay, well that means 1,000 scanners need to be replaced. Uh, hundreds of automation solutions need to be rebuilt.
Hmm.
Thousands of vendors need to use a new system. Um, that sounds great. If it fails for a minute, I believe our cost per minute was $5,000.
Hmm.
So, you tell a vendor that, hey, we want to buy your new software for $1 million. It sounds like a boon, but if anything goes wrong, you're out $1,000 a minute. Okay. I
Hmm.
mean, we've all done software troubleshooting. If I had to do it with a $1,000 a minute gun to my head,
Yeah.
I'd have less hair than I do now.
There you go. Absolutely. No, and is that like is it super common to have these old unsupported hardware in like highly critical environments, whether it's manufacturing or shit, the government, like it's every like all of these like I know some like I we just took one agency off of a system that was being hosted in like on IBM mainframe still.
Yeah, I can only speak to my personal, right? Nobody puts out a public record of here's all the outdated infrastructure we have for any hackers or people trying to hit us. Uh, but yeah, pretty much everywhere I've ever been, you would be every new person is shocked that what do you mean this system runs? Even the cutting edge semiconductor technology, you look in and it goes, what do you mean that's how they do this?
Hmm.
And so yeah, it's pretty ubiquitous. I,
Yeah,
I
no.
think everybody knows it. All your listeners look around and think of that one weird thing that they have, like we joked about the Excel, same thing, man. That's whether it's an old PC in the corner that happens to run payroll or you
Yep.
know there's always something.
Always, always, and dude, why do so many like yeah, and dovetailing this AI conversation, right? Yeah,
Mhm.
why do so many people start in the wrong place, and where should you start when you're looking at it doesn't matter what, but they say AI implementations or where do you really want to start, and where do most people begin?
So a lot of times people really jump in to, we want AI, right?
Hmm.
So the key is to find the specific business problem, right? What are you trying to solve? If you
Hmm.
start with what you're trying to solve, if you start with what's the job, it's a lot better. Because again, AI is a really big umbrella term,
Yeah.
right? It's always been a big umbrella. This isn't a new thing. In 15, 20 years, AI has been a big umbrella term. You look at a spam filter in your mailbox, spell check, those are AI, and they've been decades old. Now it's starting to mean generative AI and some of these more advanced chatbots, but you have to have that business understanding. You have to have that use case in place because otherwise you're just going to get drawn into the shiny toy, right? So a lot of these new AI systems, I kind of like to equate it to like imagine we're doing a project. You come over to my house for a 6 pack of beer and we're redoing the patio. What's the first thing you see when you walk into Home Depot? The brand new Milwaukee 500 different things, this new tool set, whatever. Awesome, super cool. Not what I need for this job.
Hmm.
Right? Like it's so I think a lot of these tools and a lot of this generative AI space is that big shiny DeWalt super drill saw combo kit. Great, and it might be a great deal, and it might be great for somebody down the street. But if I just need a screwdriver, I need to go get the screwdriver, or else I'm grabbing this really a full LLM chatbot is way
Right.
oversized for what I need, which is just basic, decision tree.
Hmm. Yeah, no, and I always think it's funny when people talk about LLMs and agentic solutions like they're all AI is. It's like, no, dude, that's like a very, very, very small piece of
Yeah,
it.
it's a niche of an evolution of it's
Mhm. Yeah.
AI as big as you want to make that umbrella can go back to the '60s and the first ever chatbot that just asked, "How do you feel about that?" No matter what you said.
Hmm. And how did you feel about that?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I,
exactly.
per- I personally feel thoroughly overwhelmed, and I'm just trying to keep. I'm just the guy on a log trying to keep up, right?
Oh man, 100%. And so like where should people and like where should organizations really begin their evaluation of technology? Like, what's the starting point? And, understanding the complexities around upgrading old systems. Like, what is that, when does it make sense to take that risk and that expense?
Man, if it was easy, everybody would do it, right?
Hmm.
So having the expertise, right? What the business leaders, what stakeholders can really focus on. You can't know everything. Bringing in expertise, bringing in guys who have new tools, new products is great. They have that experience. But from the stakeholder business perspective, you really need to be honest about your problem, right?
Mhm.
Like we said about the computer running payroll. If payroll runs every Thursday and it's
Yep.
not a problem,
Yep.
spending $1 million on a new payroll suite isn't particularly viable, right? It doesn't
Mhm.
make sense.
Yeah.
Um, you are starting to stack your technology. There's these deprecating technology issues and security issues. Well, besides that, right? Like just from a business value, if we focus on that perspective, you want to find that thing. And I think a lot of the problem is that the modern LLMs and stuff are and modern AI is getting a lot better. It's able to do a lot of things that people kind of just take for granted as, yeah, I have to do that. There's no way a computer could do this thing that I do.
Hmm.
When you talk about uh, repetitive tasks and tasks like that, they're getting a lot better, and they're getting a lot better at not an understanding, but a prediction, right? They can interpret language a lot better than they historically had. So really focusing on what's eating my employees up, what's eating my time up, where are we wasting that money, whether that be on lost leads, whether that be on pursuing things that end up going over budget, right? Where are you finding that issue, and then finding somebody who can help you with that to implement that right solution.
Hmm. No, man, 100%. Absolutely. No, that makes sense. So you actually need to define the problem and understand what it is, how much of a problem it actually is, and really what's the whether it's worth you know, putting the time, effort, and energy into not just a system upgrade, but then you also have to think, and I think a lot of people don't think about this, is, the personnel upgrade, right?
Yeah.
You have to to your point, you got to retrain vendors, you got to retrain systems, you got to retrain people, you have to rework processes. It's a huge, 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 huge effort and a huge lift, right?
Well, and you nailed it with define the problem, because if you can't define the problem, how do you define success?
Correct.
Right. So we spent $1 million on this AI. Okay, what did we get out of it?
Hmm.
Everybody's using it. Well, is everybody uses lots of things? Everybody's using the light bulbs. Is that like
Right. But that's a defined problem. It's dark without them, and it's safer than
exactly? Yeah.
fire. You
And
know?
everybody trips, and then you got to do that, right? So we got to that's your defined problem. So you got
Hmm.
to have those metrics, or else you're just, yeah, adoption's great, and it works, but
Hmm.
uh, spending money to just have everybody, you can spend money on everybody wear the same T-shirt.
Yeah.
Everybody adopted the T-shirt.
Hmm.
Okay,
That's
what
right.
what what did we get?
That's right. There's a lot of things I could say to that, but I'm not going to. 'Cause- Yeah,
We've
but
all gotten free T-shirts before.
exactly, man. So, and what do people underestimate the importance of data infrastructure in this, in specifically within AI? And can you kind of like elaborate on the importance of that?
Oh, I mean, I'm a data guy, so I could spend 2.5 hours, but I'm not gonna hold you up too long on a data infrastructure, so I'll keep it short. But um, yeah, that in general, people always sort of assume, oh yeah, it's ones and zeros, it all talks to each other. No, um,
Mm,
no, systems don't inherently talk to each other. Pretty much every program and system you have is by design isolated, right?
mm,
You know, if our payroll software spoke to our Microsoft Teams, that would be a leak and considered a failure of that payroll software.
mhm,
If my Microsoft Teams communicated to the Zoom chat we're in right now, that would be a security fit. So inherently, these systems don't want to talk to each other. They want to do their thing and do what it is. So you've got to have that ability to get in there. Like we talked about the DOS thing, right? What we
mm,
used was the DOS virtual machine, right? And all we could see was the keyboard interface, and we faked our way into clicking around DOS. We didn't actually have any other way to get into it. That's dramatic, right?
mm.
But pretty much every system is siloed and isolated by default. a lot of companies do a good job of working things in the back end and having it all on one SQL server, all that, but you've got to work on that, right? You've got to constantly work on that architecture to bring in new systems and make sure they integrate with your old systems and integrate with your data lake or your data mesh or whatever buzzword it is this week. So here, I'll just leave a little blank and you can insert that. Or your, all right. So when,
Yeah.
when, when Microsoft comes up with a new phrase or Databricks comes up with a new phrase, now we're ready for that. But
Mhm.
having all that together and being able to speak to that and access that is a constant battle. And if you don't know what your company's doing or your agency's doing to work towards that, they're probably falling behind and stuff's not coming together.
Absolutely. No, and how do you make the determinations of what is, a risk and what is needed to make these systems work? Because, to your, garbage in, garbage out, if you have garbage data going in to feed these systems, you're going to have garbage outputs, and it doesn't matter what the system is. What, but how do you decide what is too risky to link and what isn't? And, like or does it really just depend?
Oof. I mean, it's always going to depend. Um, we talked about the example before where you're talking about any downtime is thousands of dollars a minute. Like it's really easy to make that cost benefit analysis, right? Uh, I'm not willing to accept downtime under any circumstance. Okay, that if you're talking about you know a nuclear submarine, right? That unacceptable, right? You are secure, you are isolated by design. It is
Mhm.
not happening. We are not putting this at risk. If you talk about personal healthcare info, you wipe your hands of it.
Mhm.
Once you get outside of that and you get into more of those gray areas, I think in general, anything you can do to integrate to make that data visible to something, right? Whether that be a data scientist, a data analyst, making your data visible, making your data accessible for analysis, I think is always important,
I agree.
right? So even if it seems like, oh, it's inaccessible, you can set up web scrapers, you can set up all these other things. I mean, I've set up a web scraper that went through and did 300,000 rows and just pulled the data out of each one and put it into a SQL table that we could then access. It's like because we just couldn't click through every single one to see all the different dots and where they were,
Hmm.
and that's all it took. But that took a lot of time. That took a lot and had to run every day to keep that database updated. But they are doable, and then that allowed us to do that long term big picture analysis.
Absolutely. No, and that makes a lot of sense. And um do so also like what, yeah, and yeah, but I mean like you still don't want to connect your payroll data to certain things, right? Like and that needs to be
Correct.
followed
And
all.
healthcare data, right? You never,
Sure.
it's not your data, right? You don't do it. And being secure, making sure that it's secure is always critical.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. No. And but I mean, if you depersonalize the healthcare data, I think that you can get a lot of really interesting trends on like a macro health scale, which I
Yeah.
think is all what kind of what public health is, but or a lot of it anyway. But like as you look at, implementing these systems, like what kind of, you know, how to the poor data architecture and disconnected legacy systems that we're discussing. Um, obviously with increasing with new trends around a lot of these models like Mythos and other models out there that can
Yeah.
hack, that can find vulnerabilities in systems in stacks very very easily. Yeah, how does that change the calculus or the math around the maintaining these legacy systems, or does it?
So we've had a lot of success with because these models are trained on a lot of older, code bases and code systems, right? They have knowledge of COBOL, right? They have notice of
Mhm.
old, Fortran. Like they've seen it, they know what it looks like. They're really good at kind of explaining that back end stuff. So if you have somebody who can actually get to your source code, we've had a huge advantage in being able to actually provide that source code to some of these coding agents and saying, what does this do? Because a lot of the times, whoever you know, either the institutional knowledge is gone, the original developer was a company that went belly up 20 years ago, whatever it may be. A lot of these older systems are running on languages that are just not common anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The large language models, especially the coding bots, have really changed the calculus on that ability to maintain and understand these, you know, hard to position languages, right? There's not a lot of bodies out there that are doing it. They didn't build that exact system. I love Python. I work with Python every day. Just handing me somebody else's Python code does not guarantee that I can read it, right? I,
Yeah.
Developers are their own unique monster, right? They everybody's got their own little uh, area.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to actually use these coding agents to analyze and interpret that, and then also to spin up, new versions of that, right? Take this Fortran thing that was being done and bring it into Python, bring it
Mm-hmm.
into JavaScript, and start doing that. We've seen a lot of success with that. Um, that's the one area where it's very impressive what it's been able to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I mean, is that it, is it good that it can do that and read through and kind of parse out what these things are supposed to be doing? And how accurate is it? How much better
That's
than
a
a human?
morality question. I can't answer. Is it good? Does it do it well? Okay, yeah.
Right. Is it good at its job? How's that?
You go. We It's a moving target, right?
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago when I started playing with them, I generally, it could do a line, a function pretty well. Some of the new, we're playing around with some Amazon Kiro, Claude Code. Um, Color me impressed. I would say up there with most developers. Now, that's if you give it clear expectations, if you give it clear guidance. If I've always said that developers will all be replaced once customers provide perfect guidance and
Mm-hmm.
perfect requirements gathering. So we'll never be replaced. It's
Yeah.
historically no one ever has perfect guidance or perfect. We all live on that kind of gray area, but if based on what you give it good requirements, you give it good instruction, it can do a pretty bang up job.
So the it's just more garbage in, garbage out stuff.
Yeah, exactly. If you say I want a website that looks like that, okay. If you
Mm-hmm.
go through and say I want it with this theme, I want a modern layout, I want to use these headings,
Yeah.
you're going to get quality.
No, 100%, man. And especially with these older systems, man, what kind of institutional knowledge is around running them, and how do you recommend people address like capturing that before like key people tend to leave or retire?
I it's very You can't recapture institutional knowledge, right? It's hard earned. It tends to be something that somebody's really put their time into. They've got
Hmm.
10 years at the company and they know that you know so like we can keep joking about the payroll computer, right? Somebody knows where that is. We had a robot that ran on a 98 compact. Somebody quietly behind the scenes went on eBay and had bought, I don't know, a dozen 98 compacts that we had in a storage room somewhere. They weren't on the inventory. They were just hidden away, tucked in a corner, and Clay knew where to get them, and he could go get them. And the day Clay leaves, nobody knows how that magic computer suddenly knew. You know,
Hmm.
this has worked straight for 20 years. No, it's not worked for 20 years. It's been working for a year and a half. It's going to burn out, and then we're going to replace it with that other one. So, yeah, having those institutional like knowledge bases, having that handover is critical. And I do think that's where AI can struggle a lot because you're it's almost exclusively edge cases, right? Oh
Hmm.
yeah, 90% of the time we do this, but you know in February because it's not 30 days we have to do this. Oh, in every year at the end of the year we have to turn this over or else it causes a problem, right? All those little edge case scenarios, those don't have a good tendency to make it into the requirements. Those don't have a good tendency to make it into the system design documents,
Hmm.
and that's where the AI starts. That's the garbage in that you don't see coming. It's a lot of edge cases.
Hmm. Absolutely. No, 100%. There's a lot of edge cases around that. And and it's really interesting to see how these like it's interesting to see how organizations are trying to capture that. institutional knowledge because like there's a program that we're working on that we have worked on where like this system that we're upgrading is 35 years old. All of the documentation for it burned in a fire 5 years ago, and there's only one guy who knows how this system works. One guy, right?
And he's right at retirement age, and he's exhausted, and he doesn't have time for you.
Correct. Exactly. And because he's trying to keep the thing running. And it's like if
Yeah.
you break it, you buy it. And it's like I don't want to break it because I don't want to buy it.
Uh,
So like
it's ubiquitous, right? It's not this seems like a crazy story. Nope. We all saw how that was coming. His name's Gary. He's
yeah.
62.
Yeah, and he's tired of your shit, right? Like
Yep. That's
it's exactly
I,
where he is, man.
absolutely.
And so like like obviously, I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about ROI, or our
Yeah.
ROI adjacent things, man. How should organizations be like, especially ones running these older systems, be measuring AI ROI, and like where can they get ROI from these AI systems quickest?
My thing is really, the same place where AI has, before AI was generative AI, just repetitive tasks, right? Things that people are doing a bunch and are really basic and just, we talked about it at our own company, timesheets, or not timesheets, expense reports, right? I sent in my expense report. I forgot to attach the hotel receipt. Now I'm wasting time to put the hotel receipt in. My manager's looking at it. Everyone's reviewing it, and we've wasted 20 minutes of everybody's time when we could have just run a quick check and said, "Hey, here's my expense report. What would you expect to see out of this?" Boom, 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 boom. Those things.
Hmm.
Boom. So anything like that, oh, we do this, 20 times a week, 100 times a week, are always a really good one.
Hmm.
Um, we're also entering an era where SMEs can have more of a weigh in, right? You have people who have this like maybe knowledge in accounting, or they have knowledge in uh, Gary and his system, right? Whatever it may be, the coding is becoming more available to them. I see a lot of that coming where these agents and it's easier than ever to build an agent with some of these tools. I see that kind of that agentic angle instead of just the one chatbot to rule them all, everybody having a couple different agents that help them with those small tasks, your little team of interns, right? That can help you with your very specific small task and doing a lot of that. I think that's where there's a lot of ROI with these tools is, don't look at it as how do we replace 80% of the work that's being done. Where's that big chunk of 20% of the work that is just a total waste that no one enjoys, no one wants. Boom, you just automate that, you free up time for better, more valuable work.
Hmm. Absolutely. Hang on. Yeah, man. No, you absolutely, and that's exactly what you're looking for. You want to free up the time of these
Yeah.
experts to do the
Yeah.
things that they're an expert in, right? And
And cool things we never expected, right? That come up with new ideas that we never even thought about. That's what people are good at, right?
absolutely, 100%. And what spots do you generally see people wasting money on AI, trying to like force solutions and things? Like, do you see that, and kind of what does that look like?
I Yeah, I see a lot of people looking for that, that god tier AI, right? That amazing does everything, my super employee that can do everything and fixes all my problems. Uh, you know, very few organizations have that, right? You hire an accountant for accounting. You hire engineers to do your engineering. You don't hire you don't hire 10 different people and tell them all to do the same thing. You give those specific tasks. So I really lean towards that agentic approach of find the specific tasks, find the specific deliverable, and even some of these half billion, 1 billion parameter models that you can run on a desktop can do a lot of these small tasks if you just tell it, hey, analyze this document and spit out a result. Analyze this Excel sheet, analyze this CSV, spit it out for me. You don't have to bring in a 20 trillion model like
Hmm.
ChatGPT or Claude or something for
Right.
every single task, right? There, it's a bazooka.
Hmm. Absolutely. No, it's right. It's the right size solution for the right problem. Uh,
Exactly.
And I think that AI actually can bring a lot of value for specific,
Absolutely, yeah.
but only if you properly define what you want to do with it, right?
Yeah, I mean, back to our previous right. If Claude's the bazooka, yeah, the bazooka is going to kill the deer, but you're not going to walk away with any deer meat.
Yep.
You've wasted. It's gone, right?
Hmm. Correct.
So right sizing that problem, you're paying for all that compute, right?
Hmm.
If you're paying those Anthropic tokens and you go through $200,000 in token budget and it was a $10,000 engineering problem, uh-oh.
Hmm. Absolutely, man. And yeah, I know you've done a lot of work in secure environments that we're not allowed to talk about publicly. But yeah, I like generalized, how should organizations that have a lot of concern around security, right? How should they be balancing, innovation with maintaining that security? And how is deploying AI in the government different compared to private industry? Because I know you've done both.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess we've kind of ruined the previous 30 minutes of recording, as I've said that the first step is finding that business use case. Step zero is security, right?
Mhm.
Once you breach the security, once it's open, if you take it and you drop your health records into Chat GPT, it's gone. It,
Yep.
you can't take it back. It's gone. Once the security is breached, it's over. So
Mhm.
that needs to be day zero is what is this data? What am I dealing with? What's the security? What do I need to be aware of? How do I normalize this data or anonymize this data to make it so that everything's good and all right? Because you can't go back, and that's just the facts of it, right? It's not a scare tactic. It's not a don't adopt AI, but you got to be aware of that, or else you're really going to get yourself in trouble. From the government standpoint, right? Um, they definitely value security and stability.
Mhm.
I don't think that'll come as a surprise to anybody. Security and making sure that everything's good is way more important than implementing the next thing tomorrow, right? Just throwing something out there is a great way to end up in front of Congress with a bunch of questions.
Mhm.
So it prevents its own challenges, but it does prevent or does occur for some unique innovations, right? We were able to do some work on Navy submarines and Navy radio rooms where it's a totally isolated environment, right? You don't even have Google. If you ever try to do programming or development and you want to turn off your Wi-Fi or your Google and try and do any development, good luck. It's a challenge. So we had to come up with some really interesting tactics and techniques for that environment where something you kind of just take for granted is not there.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
No, man, 100%. Absolutely. Absolutely. And how do these systems, like how does it differ between government and industry, or government and private sector, I should say? What are like the major, like broad strokes, major differences?
broad strokes, I mean, you look at major industry, it comes down to the dollars, right? You said, what's the ROI? The ROI is always the same. How many dollars in, how many dollars out, right? If you can't convert it to that, you're probably not going to get there. Um, Government, it feels like there's a moving KPI almost always, right? It's, what is this contract deliverable? What is the time that we need to do it? What's the head count? There's always something in the contract and that moves contract to contract, right? If depending on how the contract was structured, that's king, right? The dollar's not king. The contract is king because if you don't deliver on the contract, you're in breach. So that's the biggest difference. On the private side, even if you have a contract established, if you can show the ROI or show the money or the monetary reason, usually that's going to be king.
Mhm.
Government contracts king.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, no, contracts king in the government, the ROI is king in that space. And dude, are there risks around connecting like these old systems to these modern AI solutions?
According to Terminator 1 and 2, there are a lot of risks, right? You can't hook the AI up to the long. No,
Mm-hmm.
if I think Skynet's really going to struggle. I don't think whoever wrote Terminator had a background in implementation.
Nope.
They're just not designed for the modern integration, right? Each generation it just gets harder and harder. You get further away. I don't have a mouse or a keyboard with the old school barrel plugs on them.
Hmm.
anymore, right? So if my keyboard broke on one of these older machines, I can't even get a keyboard on it.
Hmm.
Uh, we had machines that predated USB. USBs came out in 1996. There's your fun fact for the day. I had machines that predated the USB,
Hmm.
um, and some of those are still running missile silos and
Hmm.
critical dam infrastructure and all these other things, and they don't even have USB drives. Like
Hmm.
so
No.
that
So you can't
just
even plug
just
in, and let alone USB-C, and they don't make converters
yeah,
anymore. They don't make converters for those plugs anymore, I would assume.
yeah. Some of them, I mean, they're going like we said about the legacy systems and the institutional knowledge, right? You walk in there and you go, "Why you got a bunch of floppies on your desk?" Oh, because that machine over there
Hmm.
only takes a 3.5 inch floppy, and that's all I can put in it. It's like, oh,
Crazy. Right.
okay,
Yeah, absolutely. No, and there's not a lot of money in making a conversion, like a convert. You plug in a floppy thing, like a floppy disk that has a cord coming out. Like you remember the old
yeah, a tape
tape aux
deck,
player? Yeah, the
yeah.
tape deck aux
I
players. Yeah,
had a 2007 Honda CRV with that.
yeah.
I'm dating
Hmm.
myself again.
Yeah, man.
Everybody who remembers that, go take an ibuprofen for your back.
Yeah, dude. I remember when I upgraded my aux cable in my car to an aux Bluetooth that I could then connect to, and it's like, dude, this is so amazing, right? Like.
Welcome to the future, y'all. But that's exactly what we're talking about, right? That's that whole every one of those steps. You start getting into, how do you even move? Okay, yeah, I can get the data onto a floppy, but I can't, drop this new Python web application into this old machine. I can't just take this data out and put it into any, I don't even have a system that can read this random file that
Hmm.
only works on a Windows 98. So you gotta create these like steps of, okay, how do I walk it from there to here, and how do I walk 30 years in a day? And you just can't
Right.
do it.
No,
So
and technology's come pretty far in 30 years, right? Like, a lot of ways. But I know like ATMs are. I remember when it was the ATM, their operating system was all running on XP, and like the banks had to pay Microsoft to continue the support on
yeah,
XP 'cause they needed to modernize, right? But they needed more
yeah.
time to do it because you think about how many
Just think
ATMs there
about
are out there, and
millions of
those are
ATMs.
not connected to the internet, right? On purpose.
No, yeah, and they can't risk any security. If there was a security encroachment, right, and they figured out here's how you get around the Windows XP hack, and they can go to every ATM and get $300 at a time,
Hmm.
it's a disaster.
Absolutely.
So
No, 100%, man. Absolutely. And and like looking ahead as we kind of sit here and we understand the scope and the magnitude of these problems, right? Because there's a huge amount of problems in all these legacy systems, right?
mhm.
Which are everywhere, running everything that we don't think about, and are antiquated and old, but they work largely. Um, they might not have all the new bells and whistles, but they work largely. Like what lessons would you leave with folks that are sitting on these systems, sitting on top of them around modernization, whether it be AI or just the tech stack in general? What would you give people? What lessons would you give people about, you know, the modernizing legacy systems in the AI age?
Man, it's tough. So I do think we're in the last year or two closer than ever on building custom software, building custom agents, deploying these innovative approaches in a way that has not really been available. You look at you know document analysis and scraping and things like that. These tools are very good at it, right? If the government's going to upload 10,000 pages of a document, we can scan through it and convert it into text. We used to have somebody manually data enter that, right?
Hmm.
So that's coming along really nicely, where that's going to speed up a lot. Um, some being aware of the things that are integrated. Uh, I, the answer isn't just to ignore it, right? The answer isn't just to say we'll never replace it. Some of the stuff. Even these 50-year-old systems, these 60-year-old systems, eventually everything goes. So just getting to that plan early, and understanding that every year it's only going to get further away. Um, I think is critical. You've got to have that long lens. I don't know it's hard to point to one individual, right? Congressman's got 2 years, a senator's got six, and we're talking about things that are 30, 40 years.
Hmm.
of age. We've got some congressmen and senators who have been there that long. I guess I can point my finger at them, but you've got to have that long lens to say something has to be done
Hmm.
and start making that plan early so that you can at least get a step closer, right?
Yep.
Even if it's only making up 20 years of that 50-year gap, if you can make up 20 years in the next
Hmm.
two, okay, well now you're at least into the early 2000s and you're not fighting from as far behind because
Hmm.
it just gets harder with each passing generation.
And I would assume that as the technological advance continues to accelerate, it's going to continue to get harder and harder because things continue to accelerate faster and faster.
Moore's law is still holding up. I mean, I worked in semiconductor when we got down under 14 nanometers, and everybody said that's it.
Hmm.
We're done. Seven's the size of an atom. It's not happening. So I've watched Moore's law survive everything, and now the AI is coming. Uh, yeah, it doesn't seem like it's slowing down.
No, it's going to continue to accelerate. And so I think you're right. You just make progress, right? It's the most
Yeah.
important thing. Make progress, but don't break things at the same time.
Yeah. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Just
Yeah, 1,000% right.
start taking bites, see what you can, have a plan, and start working at it. Just
Yeah, man.
continuing to say no is going to
Yeah.
become unsustainable.
So before we wrap up here, Austin, I just one
Yeah.
more question for you, man. What's the most interesting development you've seen in the AI world over the last, call it 6 months, to you personally?
It's a tough one. That's a good question. Um, I've really been blown away by the sort of the soft skills of the development stuff. Historically, when we would build, web apps and stuff like that with these coding agents, they would look like a, you know, high school freshman or a high school sophomore kind of built them. Like they have very basic understanding of HTML and,
Hmm.
a couple different colors. Man, these things now they all have the beautiful layout. The layouts are great. The UI is good. It's intuitive. Um, that's a huge, if you've ever taken a class on UI and UX or taken a course or seminar or really spent time understanding why things go where they are, it's pretty impressive that they've been able to integrate that into these systems so that it's starting to, you used to really be able to tell if somebody just spun it up in Claude Code or whatever and dropped it. Man, they're getting pretty. They've always worked, but now they're getting pretty.
Yeah, and that's important. That's like the most important thing. I think people underestimate. Like, I will not fight a bad UI. If there's a bad UI, I'm just not going to fight it, right? I'm done. I'm out.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, right? We were dealing with the Navy one time. We made an entire contract out of. We showed them that the way they were doing it through the Windows command line commands, right? Having to type them. So I just did the math on keystrokes of what they were spending on the keystrokes to do that, 100, 200 times a day versus if we had a really basic web application to click and trigger them.
Hmm.
And I think we reduced 150 keystrokes per, and it was like 8,000 man hours a year.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it's just like, yep, that guys, it doesn't, there's no reason that, that little difference in UI where you say, yeah, it works. Why mess with it? Exactly like we said, that small change because it was being done two, three, 400 times a day
Yep.
was 8,000 hours a year.
Right. Which is four people full time annually,
Yep.
right? For
And
the,
if you're talking about a ship, you're talking about four people you got to feed, you got to have water
Mhm.
for, you got to have food for, you got to have all this stuff, you got to have space for, right? Space is at a premium on the ship, so all that stuff. It was like, wow, we got four extra bodies out of this. Like, yeah, man, that
Yep.
matters.
The little things, man. I think that's the biggest piece that people underestimate when you look at these implementations, right? Everybody wants to go for the big, sweeping, pretty massive upgrade, but dude, the
Yep,
savings and the real ROI to me it's in the little things. It's in the details, right?
absolutely.
It's that can we reduce this by 10%, right? And then or like by when you start talking like call it Medicaid budgets or Medicaid spend annually, right? you reduce the wastage by 0.5%. You're talking billions and billions and billions of
Yeah.
dollars.
Yeah, when you're talking about this high volume stuff, right? The guy running FedEx, if he can shave a tenth of a penny off of packages, that's
Mhm.
billions,
Yep.
right? It's billions of dollars. It's a tenth of a penny. You think, what does that matter? Who cares? That's
Scale, baby.
billions in revenue. Yeah.
Scale. Right. Dude, that's awesome, man. Any last things you'd like to say, Austin? Anything else? Any questions that I forgot to ask you?
No, a really good chat. We've talked a couple times about this.
Yeah,
Maybe,
man.
maybe I can come back on if we have another good chat and
I'd
think of
love
something
to.
else. But I always like talking legacy systems and sort of the challenges and complaining about past incidents. And you
Yeah,
gave
man.
me plenty of venue to do that, so I appreciate you.
Awesome. Appreciate you, Austin. Thank you so much for joining. And everybody out there, thank you so much for listening to Robots and Red Tape. I hope you're having a wonderful day.